Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at
Transformers and Rectifiers,
Yeah.
India Limited.
yeah, and for brevity's sake, we'll just be referring to them as Terrell.
That's a good idea.
So we've got 3 different sources for this deep dive. All of them are dated April 8th, 2025. We've got the official outcomes of their recent board meeting, their audited financial results, and that's both standalone and consolidated, and also their investor presentation.
So yeah, this should give us a really comprehensive look at Terrell and how they're doing right now.
Right. And as always, our goal is to get to the most important points of all this information and deliver to you a clear picture of the company's recent performance.
Yeah.
And also give you a good idea of where they seem to be headed. All this without, bogging you down with too many.
Right. No death by spreadsheet.
Exactly. We'll be focusing on what's significant and what we think might spark your curiosity.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
So why don't we start with those board meeting highlights? It seems like they had a pretty full agenda for that meeting.
Yeah, definitely. One of the most important things from the meeting was the approval of their audited financial results. And this was for both the quarter and the full financial year that ended on March 31st, 2025.
Okay, so those are out there now if people want to go.
Yeah, those are publicly available. They're on Terrell's website.
Great. Another key item was the dividend. They recommended a dividend of 20% or 0.20 rupees per share. And each of those shares has a face value of 1 rupee.
Right.
But of course, this is still subject to shareholder approval at the upcoming annual general meeting, or AGM.
Yeah, exactly. And the board also set some dates around this.
Okay.
So the record date is Friday, May 9th, 2024. Now that year, 2024, is almost certainly a typo because it should be 2025 for the financial year ending March 2025.
Right. Makes sense.
But anyway, the dividend payment, assuming it's approved at the AGM, that'll be made within a week after that meeting. And that dividend, by the way, is a great sign for investors because it often means that the company is really confident in its profitability.
Right. They feel like they can give that money back.
Exactly.
Good catch on that year, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just you've got to pay attention to those details.
Right. Okay, so they also said that the cutoff date for voting at the AGM is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025.
Okay, so you got to get those votes in.
Yeah, get them in early.
By May 6th.
Exactly.
And the AGM itself, the 31st annual general meeting, that's scheduled for Tuesday, May 13th, 2025 at 11 a.m.
Right.
And what's interesting is that it's going to be held via video conferencing or some other type of audiovisual means. Which is pretty common now. You don't have to be there in person.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier for people who can't physically travel to the meeting.
Right, you get much broader participation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so one other thing that shareholders should be aware of is the register of members and the share transfer register.
Oh, wait.
That'll be closed from Saturday, May 10th through Tuesday, May 13th. So that's inclusive of both of those dates. And this closure is all tied to that dividend.
Okay, yeah.
And the AGM process.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So beyond just those financial results and the AGM stuff, there were also some notable reappointments that the board approved. Now, of course, these still need shareholder approval.
Yeah.
But they approved Mr. Jitendra U. Mamtora to be reappointed as chairman and whole-time director.
Okay.
And this reappointment would be for another 3 years, starting on January 1st, 2026.
Wow, so he's been there a while then.
Yeah, he's actually the founder of the company.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's a real key figure there.
Okay, great.
He's a technocrat focused on design and marketing, and they credit him with really scaling up their manufacturing capabilities, which is huge.
Absolutely.
So this long tenure and this reappointment, it's a good sign. It probably provides a sense of stability and continuity for the company.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which is important for investors.
Absolutely. It looks like Mrs. Karuna J. Mamtora is also being reappointed as an executive director.
Yes, that's right. And her reappointment is also for 3 years, but it starts a little later on April 1st, 2026.
Okay.
And she's been with Terrell since the beginning.
Wow, so since inception.
Yeah, since the very beginning.
Okay.
And she focuses on really important stuff like corporate social responsibility. In fact, she's the chairperson of the CSR committee.
Oh, wow.
And she also works on general administration and human resources development.
So it's interesting how the founding family is still very heavily involved.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so another noteworthy thing from the board meeting, was the revisions to the remuneration for a few people.
Yes, that's right. They approved revisions to the remuneration terms for Mr. Jitendra U. Mamtora, Mrs. Karuna J. Mamtora,
Okay.
and also for Mr. Satyan J. Mamtora. He's the managing director.
I see.
And these new terms are effective as of April 1st, 2025. And this is the kind of adjustment that often reflects how the board sees the executive team's performance.
Yeah, they must be happy with how things are going.
Exactly. Yeah. It shows how much they value their contribution and how important they are to the company's future.
Absolutely. Now, just for full transparency, the documents that we have also disclose the relationships between these key people.
Right.
So Mr. Satan J. Mamtora and Mrs. Karuna J. Mamtora are both relatives of Mr. Jitendra U. Mamtora.
Yep.
And then Mr. Jitendra U. Mamtora and Mr. Satyan J. Mamtora are both relatives of Mrs. Karuna J. Mamtora.
Gotcha. Well, it's always good when they just put that information right out there so everybody knows.
Oh, yeah. It's important for investors to have this information.
Right up front.
Right. Okay, so,
Oh, one last thing about these board members.
yeah.
The board confirmed that neither Mr. Jitendra U. Mamtora nor Mrs. Karuna J. Mamtora are currently blocked from being directors by any order from SEBI
Okay.
or any other relevant authority.
And for those who don't know, SEBI, that's the Securities and Exchange Board of India. It's the regulatory body for the securities markets there.
Exactly, yeah. So, it's a standard confirmation,
Right.
but it's an important one from a governance perspective.
Absolutely. So just to give you an idea of how much they covered in that meeting, it lasted an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, that's a lot.
It was on April 8th, 2025. All right, so let's move on from the board meeting and get into the nitty-gritty of the financial performance of Terrell.
Okay, that's good.
So let's start with those standalone highlights for the year ending March 31st, 2025.
All right, so on a standalone basis, Terrell reported a total income of 198,292 lakhs
Okay.
for that fiscal year.
Yeah.
Now, 1 lakh equals 100,000 rupees. So that's about 19.83 billion rupees.
Wow. Okay, so that's a decent amount.
Oh, yeah, it's a significant amount.
Right.
And their profit before tax, that came in at 24,745 lakhs. So about 2.47 billion rupees.
Okay.
And then their net profit after tax was 18,757 lakhs, or about 1.88 billion rupees.
That's a pretty sizable operation.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at their earnings per share, both the basic and diluted EPS are reported at 6.31. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this number has been restated.
Oh, why is that?
Well, they issued some bonus shares.
Oh, okay.
And a bonus share is basically a free share
Oh, okay.
that they give to existing shareholders. So it increases the number of outstanding shares, which means they have to restate the prior EPS figures
Right.
so that you can actually compare them accurately.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. So if we jump over to their balance sheet as of March 31st, 2025, their total assets were 204,706 lakhs, which is about 20.47 billion rupees.
Oh.
Their equity share capital was 3,002 lakhs, which is about 300.2 million rupees. And their other equity, which includes things like reserves and surplus, that was 118,040 lakhs, or about 11.8 billion rupees.
Right.
So this all gives you a good idea of their financial health.
Yeah, it's a snapshot.
Yeah, exactly. A snapshot of how they're structured financially.
Right. Okay, so what about their cash flow?
Yeah, so their net cash from operating activities for that year was 9,863 lakhs, which is about 986.3 million rupees.
Okay, so that's the cash they're generating from their core business.
Exactly. So now let's look at the consolidated financial performance,
Okay.
because that gives us an even better picture, by bringing in the results of all their different subsidiaries.
Right, so it's the whole picture.
A whole Terrell group.
Right.
So the consolidated results include Terrell itself, the holding company, and all its subsidiaries. And that includes Transpairs Limited, Transworld Mechanical Engineering Works Limited, Terrell Infrastructure Limited, Salvas Engineering Company Private Limited, Terrell Switchgear Private Limited.
Okay.
And then we have Triveni Transtech India Private Limited.
And that one was acquired fairly recently, right?
Yeah. Terrell acquired them on January 28th, 2025.
Okay, very recent.
Very recent. So when you combine the financial performance of all those entities, the consolidated total income for the year ended March 31st, 2025, was 205,108 lakhs.
Okay.
So that's about 20.51 billion rupees. The consolidated profit before tax was 28,485 lakhs, about 2.85 billion rupees.
Gotcha.
And the consolidated net profit reached 21,644 lakhs, which is 2.16 billion rupees. But of that net profit, 21,427 lakhs, so most of it, is actually attributable to the owners of the parent company.
Okay.
The little bit that's left over, that belongs to non-controlling interests.
Right. So that's just, people who own parts of...
Little pieces of the subsidiaries.
Right, right. Okay, so the consolidated earnings per share, both basic and diluted, stand at 7.21.
Right. And again, this has also been restated to reflect the bonus share issuance.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because the consolidated EPS is a bit higher than the standalone EPS.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that.
Which tells us that, on average, the subsidiaries are doing pretty well. They're contributing positively to the overall earnings.
Right, so it was a good decision to acquire them.
Yeah, seems like it. Seems like it. Now, let's take a quick look at the consolidated balance sheet as of March 31st, 2025.
All right.
Total assets were 218,498 lakhs, so about 21.85 billion rupees. Their equity share capital was 3,002 lakhs, which is 300.2 million rupees.
Okay.
And their other equity was under 22,190 lakhs, about 12.22 billion rupees. And then you see that non-controlling interest of 2,043 lakhs or 204.3 million rupees. Again, that just represents the part of the equity in those subsidiaries that Terrell doesn't fully own.
Right. Gotcha.
So the consolidated net cash from operating activities was a solid 15,658 lakhs, about 1.57 billion rupees.
Okay.
And that's a pretty good jump from the standalone number. It really shows how much cash the whole group is generating.
Right. Now, there's an emphasis of matter section in the auditor's report.
Oh, yeah.
And it's specifically about their new subsidiary, Triveni Transtech.
Okay. What do they say?
Well, they said that even though Triveni Transtech is dealing with net worth erosion, meaning their liabilities are higher than their assets, the auditors think that Terrell's majority stake is going to improve things, make the business prospects better, and more profitable overall.
So basically, they're saying that even though Triveni is struggling right now, they think Terrell can turn things around.
Yeah, and this is a good sign for Triveni Transtech continuing as a going concern.
Right.
Now, remember, Terrell acquired a 51% stake in Triveni for 12.81 crore. So this definitely looks like a strategic move, a turnaround play.
That's a really good point. It shows that Terrell sees potential in Triveni, even though they're in a tough spot financially.
Right. Maybe they have access to new markets or new technology, or maybe there's some good synergies with their existing operations.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
All right. So we've covered the board meeting and all those numbers.
Right.
But now I want to talk about their investor presentation, because this is where we'll see how Terrell views itself and what their plans are for the future.
Okay, sounds good.
So they position themselves as a leader in the Indian transformer and reactor manufacturing sector.
Okay.
And they say they're the second largest in terms of capacity.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And their product range is huge. I mean, they have everything from those massive power transformers all the way up to 500 MVA and 1200 kV.
Wow.
And those are the ones used in the national power grid.
Right.
They also have smaller transformers, for furnaces and rectifiers and power distribution. They even make transformers for locomotives and for that new green hydrogen sector that everyone's talking about.
Interesting.
And then, of course, they make reactors, which are super important for the stability of the power grid.
Absolutely.
They're clearly a business-to-business company.
Right.
And they work with a whole bunch of different industries.
Yeah, it sounds like they have a lot of different irons in the fire.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So their installed manufacturing capacity is about 40,000 MVA, which is pretty big.
Yeah, it is.
And they've sold their products to over 25 countries.
Wow, a real global presence. So they're not just a domestic player.
No, not at all. Okay, so their financial highlights for fiscal year 2025. They reported a revenue of 1,950 crores, an EBITDA of 320 crores with a margin of 16.41%, and a PAT of 187 crores with a margin of 9.44%.
Pretty healthy margins.
Yeah, and they said that this is a big jump from what they did in fiscal year 23 and 24.
Right, which is good news for investors.
Right. Now, their order book is really impressive. As of March 31st, they had a whopping 5,132 crores worth of unexecuted orders.
So that's revenue they haven't even recognized yet.
Right, exactly. And in 2025 alone, they got new orders worth 4,504 crores. And a huge chunk of that, 2,144 crore, came in just the fourth quarter.
It's amazing.
And they're still negotiating over 22,000 crores worth of inquiries.
So they're not slowing down.
No, not at all. And get this, in fiscal year 25, they landed their largest single order ever. It was a 740 crore order from GetTeco, which is the Gujarat Energy Transmission Corporation.
Wow, that's a big win. It tells you that they're really competitive and that they're a major player in this market.
Absolutely.
And with all these orders, they've got a lot of revenue visibility for the coming years.
Right, which is great for forecasting.
Exactly.
Now, the investor presentation also gives us a little history lesson on Terrell.
Okay, always like those.
Yeah, they started out just repairing transformers,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're building and commissioning these ultra-high voltage transformers.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah, and they've teamed up with some big international players like ZTR Ukraine and Fuji Electric.
Okay.
And those partnerships probably give them an edge, in terms of technology and market reach.
Yeah, it sounds like they're pretty strategic about who they work with.
Oh, yeah. And you know what else is cool?
What's that?
They're the only Indian transformer company to have a lab that's accredited by the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories. That's NABL.
Okay, so they're meeting some pretty strict quality standards.
Exactly, yeah. And that gives them a competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
Okay, so some of their recent accomplishments include raising 500 crore through a qualified institutional placement, or QIP.
Okay.
And that's how listed companies raise capital.
Right.
And then, of course, there's that acquisition.
Of Triveni Transtech, yeah.
Right, that we talked about. Okay, so let's jump to the numbers from the fourth quarter of fiscal year 25.
Okay, sounds good.
So on a consolidated basis, their revenue was 67,648 lakhs.
Okay.
That's a 32% jump
Wow.
from the same quarter in the previous year. Their EBITDA was 30,819 lakhs, a huge 90%
Yeah.
year-on-year growth. And their EBITDA margin was 20.22%.
Okay.
And then their profit after tax, that was 9,417 lakhs, which is a whopping 125% increase.
Amazing. And their peat margin.
13.78%, also very strong.
Wow, they really crushed it in Q4.
Yeah. Now, their standalone numbers also show really good growth, so it's not just the subsidiaries driving this.
Good to see.
So now let's look at some of the highlights from their balance sheet for fiscal year 25.
Right.
They've got more fixed assets now, probably because of those expansion plans.
Right, they're investing in growth.
And they've got a big jump in their capital work in progress.
Okay, so those are projects that aren't done yet, right?
Right. And their intangible assets are also higher.
Mm-hmm.
And their receivables, both current and non-current, are up. So they're making more sales.
Yeah.
Their inventories are also up, which means they're ramping up production. And they've got more cash on hand, too.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
They're in a strong position financially.
Right. And their tangible net worth has also increased a lot.
So overall, it's a really positive picture. They're growing, they're profitable, and they've got a solid financial foundation.
Absolutely. Now, the managing director, Mr. Satyan Mamtora, he's got big goals for the company.
Okay, like what?
He wants to hit US $1 billion in revenue in the next 3 financial years.
Ambition.
Yeah. And he says they've already completed phase 1 of this goal in fiscal year 24-25.
Oh, wow. So they're well on their way.
Right. They're planning to add 22,000 MVA to their EHV transformer capacity.
What does EHV stand for again?
Extra high voltage.
Right, okay.
And this new capacity should be online by February 2026. And that'll push their total capacity up to over 75,000 MVA.
That's a huge increase.
Yeah, it's a lot. And they're going to spend 550 crores over the next 15 months to make it happen.
Wow, a lot of capital expenditure.
Right. And they're aiming to be 100% backward integrated by the first quarter of fiscal year 26-27.
So that means they're going to be making more of their own components instead of buying them.
Yeah, exactly. Which gives them more control and makes them less reliant on suppliers.
Makes a lot of sense, especially with all these supply chain issues we've been seeing lately.
Right. And they've gotten some nice recognition for their work, too. They got an Operational Excellence Award from Power Grid, which is a major player in India's power transmission sector.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And they successfully exported a high-rated EAF transformer.
EAF, what's that stand for?
Electric arc furnace.
Ah, okay. So they're making these really specialized transformers.
Yeah. And they even got their first ever order for STATCOM transformers. Those are the fancy devices that help stabilize the power grid.
Right. So it sounds like they're really branching out into new areas and expanding their expertise.
Yeah. And they're seeing a lot of success. And all this, plus all those orders we talked about, has given them a record unexecuted order book.
So they're in a really strong position moving forward.
Absolutely. And the CFO, Dr. Chanchal Singh Rajora, he basically agrees. He says that fiscal year 25 was their best year ever in terms of profitability.
Okay.
And he says this is all thanks to things like faster order execution, better production planning,
Mm-hmm.
better management of their receivables, and stronger internal controls.
Makes sense. They're running a tight ship.
Yeah,
Look.
yeah. He seems very confident that they'll keep doing well.
Well, I'm not surprised, given the numbers we've seen.
Right. So they say their growth is being driven by their focus on those niche transformer segments,
Okay.
like the power transformers, furnace transformers, special transformers, distribution transformers, and rectifier transformers.
Right. They're not just sticking to the basic stuff.
And of course, they've got those reactors too, both the shunt and series types.
Right, right.
And they work with a lot of different industries like power transmission, metal processing, cement manufacturing, green energy, and railways.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They've got a diversified customer base.
Right. And a lot of them are here in India.
Yeah, so a strong domestic presence.
Okay, so to summarize, Terrell had a fantastic year in fiscal year 25. They're growing, they're making money, and they have a ton of orders.
Yeah, it's a really impressive performance.
And they're investing in their future. They're expanding capacity. They're trying to control more of their supply chain, and they're acquiring companies that they think they can turn around.
Yeah, the Triveni Transtech acquisition is a really interesting one.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out.
For sure.
Okay, so for all of you listening out there, think about this. Terrell has a massive order book and huge expansion plans. How do they manage all that?
It's a great question.
Yeah, how do they scale their operations and keep their supply chain humming along so they can actually take advantage of these opportunities?
Yeah, and what about those acquisitions? How will they integrate those companies successfully and make sure they contribute to the bottom line?
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.